Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a drug that barely even counts as a high. 30 seconds of giggles, 30 seconds of floating, and then nothing. You might blink, you might yawn, you might even wonder if it was real. It's the drug equivalent of a sneeze that feels really, really good. You know the kind, the one that shakes your whole body like a tiny earthquake. Except this sneeze has been around for 200 years, and lately it's been putting teenagers in wheelchairs, while sitting legally on the shelves of grocery stores across America. And tonight, we're tracing its journey, from discovery to stage shows, dentist offices, festival floors, and a growing epidemic of hospital visits, all caused by a tiny, legal gas canister you've probably seen in a TikTok video. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're lying right now, perhaps tucked under a blanket halfway between curiosity and sleep. Now dim the lights, take a deep breath, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine this. You're at a party, or a festival, or your friend's apartment. Someone hands you a balloon. Not a regular balloon, a slightly limp one. Room temperature, filled with something invisible. You bring it to your lips, you inhale. The first thing you notice is the taste. Slightly sweet, almost metallic. Then the warmth starts. It doesn't creep, it floods. Spreads from your lungs outward like someone poured hot honey into your chest, and it's flowing through every vein, every limb, every fingertip. The sounds change next. Everything goes echoey. Wah, wah, wah. Like the world is being played through a tunnel. Voices stretch. Music pulses. Your own heartbeat becomes a drum solo happening somewhere far away and very close at the same time. Time does something strange. 30 seconds feels like 3 minutes or 3 hours. Hard to tell. The edges of things go soft. Colours seem brighter or maybe just more interesting. You're aware that something profound is happening, something important, something you'll definitely remember. Except you won't. Not really. Not the details. Just the feeling. And then there's the laughing. It bubbles up from somewhere you can't locate. Everything is suddenly hilarious. Not funny, haha. Funny like the universe just told you a joke and you finally got it. Funny like existence itself is a punchline and you're in on it now. You're giggling, or your friend is giggling, or everyone is giggling, and nobody knows why. And that's the funniest part of all. Then it's over. 30 seconds. Maybe 45. The warmth drains. The sounds normalise. The world snaps back into its usual sharpness. You're sitting exactly where you were, holding a deflated balloon, suddenly very aware that you want to do that again. Right now. Immediately. You reach for another balloon, or you don't, but you want to. That's the thing about nitrous. It doesn't grab you the way other drugs grab you. It just leaves. Completely, immediately. No hangover, no come down, no residue. Just a memory of warmth and weirdness and the quiet certainty that it would be very nice to feel that way again. One more can't hurt, right? This is why people keep doing it. Not because they're chasing some devastating high, because it's easy, quick, vanishes so completely it barely feels like a drug at all. Legal in most places, cheap. No drug test on earth can detect it. It fits into the cracks of life, between classes, before dinner, in the parking lot before you walk into work. The perfect drug that isn't supposed to be a drug, except it is. And the bill comes due eventually. It just takes a while to arrive, and nobody mentions it at the festival. The high feels harmless because it's so short. 30 seconds. A minute. Tops. How much damage could 30 seconds possibly do? The answer depends on how many 30-second intervals you chain together. And for some people, the answer is All of them. All the 30-second intervals, back to back, for hours. This is called binging. You're not committing to a 12-hour acid trip. You're just doing one more balloon, then one more, then one more. One more can't hurt, except it can. Because while you're chasing that warm static, the gas is quietly destroying something your body desperately needs. Vitamin B12. You've probably never thought about it. It's a vitamin. It's in meat, eggs, dairy. Your body uses it to keep your nerves working properly, specifically to maintain the protective coating around your nerve fibers. Think of it like insulation around electrical wires. Without it, the signals don't travel properly. The wires start to short out. Here's the problem. Nitrous oxide destroys B12. Every single time you inhale, the gas finds whatever B12 is in your body and chemically breaks it apart. Permanently gone. Your body didn't get a vote. Your nervous system's now running on fumes. If you use occasionally a few balloons at a party once every few months, your body can replace the B12 faster than the gas destroys it. The math works out. No lasting damage. But if you binge, if you're going through box after box of whippets in a single night, the math stops working. You're destroying faster than you can rebuild. The deficit grows. And eventually your nerves start dying. It starts small, tingling in your fingers and toes, pins and needles, easy to ignore. Then the tingling becomes numbness. Then the numbness becomes weakness. Then you're 23 years old and you can't walk because the signals from your brain aren't reaching your legs anymore. Doctors used to see this once in a 20-year career. Now they're seeing it every week. Emergency rooms filling with young people who can't feel their feet. The patients are always surprised. Nobody told them. Nobody reads the warning label on whipped cream chargers. The really cruel part, B12 supplements don't prevent it. The gas doesn't care how much B12 you have in your system. It destroys whatever's there. You can swallow vitamins until you rattle when you walk, and the next balloon will still break them. Some people recover fully. Some people walk with canes for the rest of their lives. Some people don't walk again. The gas doesn't tell you which category you'll fall into. The high lasted 30 seconds. The consequences last forever. Here's the strange part. This gas, this party drug, this festival toy, this thing putting young people in wheelchairs, has been getting humans high for over 200 years. It's not new. It's not some designer drug cooked up in a basement last year. It's older than aspirin. Older than anesthesia as a medical concept. Older than the United States Constitution. And for most of those 200 years, everyone knew it got you high. That wasn't a secret. That wasn't a side effect. People discovered later. Getting high was the whole point. That was why anyone cared about it in the first place. The year was 1799, Bristol, England. A 20-year-old chemist named Humphry Davy was working at something called the Pneumatic Institution. The name sounds like a place that fixes tyres. It was actually a medical research facility founded on a magnificently stupid idea. That breathing random gases could cure diseases. Tuberculosis. Inhale this vapour. Paralysis. Try some of that fog. The facility was basically a vape shop with a medical license and zero safety regulations. Davy's job was to make these gases and test them, on himself, repeatedly. With the enthusiasm of a man who had not yet discovered that lab safety would one day be a concept. He was a professional guinea pig with a chemistry degree, and business was booming. One afternoon he heated some crystals, collected the vapour in a green silk bag and breathed it in. The warmth hit him immediately. The world went soft at the edges. Everything became hilarious. He inhaled more and more. He spent the next several hours in what he would later describe as a state of sublime emotion. He laughed until he couldn't stand. He felt connected to the universe. He staggered around the lab, bumping into equipment, having thoughts that felt profound and were probably nonsense. When it finally wore off, He did what any responsible scientist would do. He wrote down everything. Then he invited his friends to try it. Specifically, he invited the most famous poets in England. Samuel Taylor Coleridge showed up. The guy who wrote about the Ancient Mariner, the guy who'd go on to write about Kubla Khan. He inhaled Davy's gas and called it the most unmingled pleasure he'd ever felt. He came back for more, repeatedly. Robert Southey showed up. Josiah Wedgwood showed up. The intellectual elite of England, gathering in a laboratory to get legally high and discuss their feelings about it. They'd breathe from Davy's silk bags, laugh uncontrollably, say ridiculous things, and then analyse the experience with the seriousness of men who'd been to Oxford. These were, essentially, the first recreational drug parties in recorded history. And they were hosted by a scientist at a medical research facility, with government funding, your tax dollars at work, 2 centuries before anyone thought to complain about it. But here's the thing that actually matters. Davy noticed something else. During one of his sessions, he had a terrible toothache. The pain had been bothering him all day. He inhaled the gas anyway, and the pain vanished. Completely. For as long as the high lasted, he felt nothing. He wrote it down in his notebook. As nitrous oxide appears capable of destroying physical pain, it may probably be used with advantage during surgical operations. In 1800, a scientist discovered that this gas could eliminate pain during surgery. He published it in a book that people read. And then nothing happened. Surgery in 1800 was a nightmare. No painkillers, no anesthesia. If you needed a limb amputated, someone held you down while the surgeon cut as fast as possible, hoping you'd pass out from the pain before you died from the shock. Speed was everything. The best surgeons were the fastest surgeons, not because of skill, but because every extra second was another second of screaming. Davy had discovered the solution. He'd written it down. He'd published it. Nobody used it. For 44 years. 44 years of patient screaming. 44 years of surgery that was basically torture with medical degrees. 44 years of the answer sitting in a published book while doctors kept sharpening their bone saws. Why? Honestly, nobody knows for sure. Davy got distracted by other research. The medical establishment was sceptical. The gas was associated with parties and poets, not serious medicine. Whatever the reason, the connection between "this eliminates pain" and "we should use this during surgery" simply didn't get made. Sometimes history isn't tragedy, it's just embarrassing. While doctors ignored the gas, showmen discovered it. Some enterprising entertainers, the 19th century equivalent of guys who definitely have podcasts today, realised you could charge admission to watch people act ridiculous under the influence. Grand exhibitions of nitrous oxide started appearing in newspaper advertisements across England and America. The posters were spectacular. The gas will make those who inhale it laugh, sing, dance, speak, or fight. Family entertainment, assuming your family enjoyed watching strangers lose their grip on reality and basic motor function. Bring the kids. They'll learn about chemistry. They'll also watch a grown man try to fight a curtain. The format was simple. Rent a hall, put up some posters, call for brave volunteers from the audience, give them the gas, watch them stumble around like malfunctioning robots while paying customers howled with laughter. It was America's Got Talent, except the talent was being visibly intoxicated, and the judges were just regular people who'd paid a quarter to feel superior to someone. The volunteers were always men. Always. The advertisement specified 12 young men of the first respectability would be permitted on stage. Women were forbidden from participating, not because the gas was dangerous, but because watching a woman lose her inhibitions in public might lead to improper behaviour. A man stumbling into walls and babbling nonsense, entertainment. A woman doing the same, Scandal. The Victorians had priorities, and those priorities were deeply strange. And here's where American history gets genuinely weird. One of these travelling gas showmen was a teenager named Samuel Colt. Yes, that Colt. Revolver Colt. God created men. Sam Colt made them equal. Colt. Before he was a weapons manufacturer, he was a 19-year-old, touring the country as the celebrated Dr. Colt of New York, London and Calcutta. He'd never been to London. He'd definitely never been to Calcutta. He had no medical training whatsoever. He had one bag of nitrous oxide and the confidence of a man who understood that nobody checks credentials when you're entertaining them. Add a fancy title and a foreign city to your name, and suddenly you're an expert. This technique still works. LinkedIn is full of evidence. He'd roll into town, rent whatever hall was available, get volunteers high on stage, and collect the gate money while the audience wiped tears of laughter from their eyes. Every dollar went straight into his real project, building revolver prototypes in a rented room. Every giggling volunteer, every stumbling clerk, every farmer who crashed into the scenery, they were all unknowingly funding the development of American firearms. So just to be clear, the gun that won the West was partially funded by laughing gas, entertainment. Samuel Colt got his seed money from nitrous oxide. The universe writes jokes like this and expects us to take history seriously. The shows continued for decades. Across America, across England, in small towns and big cities, wherever people had spare change and a taste for watching their neighbours make fools of themselves. Doctors attended these shows, surgeons attended, men who spent their mornings holding patients down while sawing through bone paid good money to watch volunteers stumble into benches and feel nothing. They laughed along with everyone else. Then they went back to their operating rooms and the screaming continued. The answer was right there, on stage, getting laughs, reliably eliminating pain for 20 minutes at a stretch while audiences applauded. Nobody connected it to the agony happening in hospitals down the street. For 44 years, the connection sat there, like a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall while the room burns down, and everyone agrees the fire is simply how rooms work now. Until December 1844, Hartford, Connecticut. A dentist named Horace Wells bought a ticket to a laughing gas show. He was 29, successful, spent his days pulling teeth from conscious patients and trying not to think about the sounds they made. Dentistry in 1844 was torture with better lighting. That night, a volunteer named Samuel Cooley inhaled the gas and got so high he stumbled off the stage. He crashed into a wooden bench hard enough to gash his legs open, blood everywhere, pooling on the floor. The audience gasped. This wasn't part of the show. This was an accident. Someone should help him. Cooley just stood there, grinning, looking at his bleeding shins like they belonged to someone else, like the legs were an interesting problem happening to a stranger. No pain, no reaction, no acknowledgement that he'd just torn himself open on furniture. The showman kept the performance moving. The audience eventually laughed, again. But Wells wasn't laughing. Wells watched this and something clicked. The thing that should have clicked for every doctor who had ever attended these shows. If this man couldn't feel his legs being torn open, what else couldn't he feel? The next morning, Wells sat in his own dental chair, had a colleague administer the gas, had another colleague pull his tooth. He felt nothing. A new era in tooth pulling, he announced, probably while still numb. He was right. He just didn't know how short his era would be. Wells spent the next month perfecting the technique, patient after patient, tooth after tooth. Word spread through Hartford that there was a dentist who could pull your molars without making you wish for death. His practice exploded. People travelled from neighbouring towns. For the first time in the history of dentistry, patients left the chair without trauma. Some of them even smiled on their way out. This had literally never happened before. Wells knew he needed to prove this to the medical establishment. He got his chance. A demonstration at Massachusetts General Hospital. January 1845. The big leagues. Medical students packed the gallery. Faculty lined the walls. These were the gatekeepers of legitimate science. The men whose approval turned quackery into medicine, and medicine into standard practice. If Wells could prove the gas worked here, in front of these witnesses, laughing gas would enter every hospital in America. Pain would become optional. Wells would become immortal. No pressure. The volunteer was a student, young, nervous, sitting in a chair in front of dozens of skeptical physicians who'd spent their entire careers accepting that surgery meant suffering. The air was thick with doubt. These men had seen charlatans before. Snake oil salesmen with miracle cures. They were waiting for Wells to fail. Wells administered the gas. The room fell silent. The volunteer breathed in, and then, maybe he got nervous, maybe he rushed, maybe the audience made him move too fast. He started the extraction too soon, before the gas had fully taken effect. The patient groaned. Not a scream. Barely a sound, really. A noise that could have meant anything. The patient later said he'd felt almost nothing. A vague awareness, a distant pressure. Nothing like the agony that normally accompanied dental work. He would testify to this. He would tell anyone who asked that Wells' technique worked. But in that room, in that moment, with every skeptic straining for evidence of failure, the groan was enough. "Humbug!" someone shouted from the gallery. The word echoed off the walls. The audience laughed. Not politely, mockingly. The kind of laughter designed to bury someone. Wells stood there, hands still in the patient's mouth, watching his entire future collapse in real time. 3 years later, he was dead. His practice had declined. His mental health had deteriorated. He developed an addiction to chloroform, another anaesthetic he'd experimented with. In January 1848, while in a chloroform-induced state, he threw acid on 2 women in the street. He was arrested and placed in a cell in New York's Tombs prison. There, he cut his own femoral artery with a razor. He bled to death. 33 years old. Here's the cruelest part. 12 days before he cut his own artery, the Parisian Medical Society had already voted. They'd reviewed all the evidence, and they'd decided that Wells, not anyone else, was the true discoverer of anaesthesia. The first person who successfully discovered and applied the use of vapours or gases, whereby surgical operations could be performed without pain. The letter announcing his vindication arrived in New York after he was already dead. The recognition came 12 days before he gave up. He just never knew. The answer came. The man who found it was already gone, not because victory never arrived, but because he couldn't hold on long enough to receive it. A gas that makes you laugh. A chemist who noticed it killed pain and then got distracted. 44 years of screaming while the answer sat in a published book. A con artist who used the gas to fund a gun company. A dentist who finally made the connection and paid for it with everything. The pattern was already there even then. The gas gives you something wonderful. Then it takes something back. The high doesn't come free. It never comes free. But in 1848, nobody was tracking the pattern yet. The gas was just a curiosity, a medical tool for dentists, a memory of parties for poets. It hadn't found its real audience yet. Because while Wells was dying in that jail cell, someone else was asking a different question. Not, how do we stop pain? But how do we make whipped cream fluffy? The answer would put laughing gas in every grocery store in America, every restaurant kitchen, every teenager's bedroom, The gas was about to find its real audience. The question seemed innocent enough. How do we make whipped cream without all the whisking? It's the kind of question that changes history by accident. Nobody sets out to create a drug epidemic. They set out to solve minor inconveniences, and the epidemic shows up uninvited, like a cousin who heard there was free food. In the 1930s, food scientists were tinkering with aerosol technology, the science of putting things under pressure and releasing them as sprays or foams. The basic idea was elegant. Dissolve a gas into a liquid under high pressure, release the pressure suddenly, and the gas expands rapidly, turning the liquid into foam. It worked beautifully for insecticides. It worked for spray paint. It worked for hair products that would soon become architectural weapons in the battle for bigger hairstyles. Someone wondered if it might work for food. The whipped cream problem was real, if not exactly urgent. Traditional whipped cream required effort, standing over a bowl, whisking until your arm hurt, hoping you'd stop at fluffy peaks rather than accidentally churning butter. Restaurants hated it. Hotels hated it. Anyone who needed to produce large quantities of whipped cream on demand hated it. The world was ready for a shortcut. The challenge was finding the right gas. Carbon dioxide made cream taste sour, carbonic acid, the same thing that gives soda its bite. Nobody wanted their strawberry shortcake to taste like a very confused soft drink. Nitrogen worked but didn't dissolve well, creating uneven texture and disappointing results. Other gases had other problems: wrong taste, wrong consistency, tendency to occasionally explode the container, which tends to reduce customer satisfaction. Then someone remembered the gas from the dentist office. Nitrous oxide was perfect. It dissolved beautifully under pressure, saturating the cream evenly. When released, it expanded smoothly, aerating the cream into peaks that held their shape and foam that melted on the tongue. It didn't react chemically with anything in the cream. It didn't change the flavour. If anything, the slight sweetness of nitrous complemented the sweetness of the cream. And unlike some alternatives, it didn't turn your dessert into a science experiment or a small explosion. The whipped cream industry embraced the discovery with the enthusiasm of people who'd finally found the answer to a question nobody knew was keeping them up at night. By the 1940s, commercial kitchens were adopting the technology. By the 1950s, it had gone mainstream. Restaurants, diners, hotels, coffee shops. Anywhere that served pie or cake or sundaes now had a shiny metal dispenser that could produce perfect whipped cream in seconds. The delivery system was elegant. Small metal canisters, about the size of your thumb, each containing roughly 8 grams of pure nitrous oxide under pressure. You'd load one into a dispenser, crack it open, and the gas would rush into the cream chamber, ready to transform boring liquid into exciting fluffy peaks at the press of a button. They called them chargers, sometimes cartridges, innocent names for innocent objects. The Red Line Food Company was among the first to mass-produce them. Their brand name was practical, forgettable, the kind of name that belonged on restaurant supply invoices rather than in history books. They sold the chargers to bakeries, hotels, diners, catering companies, anywhere that served dessert and didn't want to pay someone to stand around whisking. Nobody thought about what else these little canisters could be used for. Why would they? They were kitchen supplies. They sat in drawers next to whisks and measuring cups. The gas that had made poets giggle and ruined a dentist's life was now utterly domesticated, completely respectable, about as dangerous as a spatula. For about 20 years, this arrangement held perfectly. The 1960s changed everything about everything, which is kind of the 1960s whole deal. The counterculture was experimenting with consciousness in ways that made the Victorian poets look like amateurs. LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, marijuana, DMT if you were adventurous, ketamine if you knew the right veterinarians. If a substance could alter perception, someone in San Francisco was probably writing a manifesto about it, and someone in Greenwich Village was probably selling it, and someone's parents were probably very confused about what had happened to their nice kid who used to play Little League. The decade approached mind-altering chemicals with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever, approaching a tennis ball. Boundless, undiscriminating, occasionally resulting in someone ending up somewhere they didn't expect. Timothy Leary was telling people turn on, tune in and drop out. Ken Kesey was driving a bus full of merry pranksters across America, spreading the psychedelic gospel. The whole project of expanding consciousness had become a movement, philosophy, a lifestyle, a way of understanding your place in the cosmos, and also a great excuse for some truly spectacular parties. Into this landscape came nitrous oxide through the back door, without any countercultural credentials at all. Not through history books. Most hippies weren't reading 19th century accounts of Humphry Davy's Bristol parties, even if those accounts would have fit right into the conversation. Not through the medical establishment. Not through any organised distribution network. Through kitchens. Someone working a late shift at a restaurant. Someone who'd heard vague stories about laughing gas from a chemistry class, or from a dentist visit, or from some half-remembered trivia. Someone bored enough to wonder what would happen if you pointed that whipped cream dispenser at your mouth instead of at dessert. Someone who tried it, felt the rush, and told a friend. The rediscovery was accidental and inevitable simultaneously. The gas had always done what it did. The delivery system had been sitting in commercial kitchens for 2 decades. All it took was one curious person to connect the dots, and then another, and another, until the connection became common knowledge in certain circles. The method was embarrassingly simple. Crack open a charger, the gas escapes with a satisfying hiss. Catch it in something, a balloon works perfectly. Bring the balloon to your lips, inhale. 30 seconds later, you understand why Davy never shut up about it. Word spread the way word spreads in countercultures, through whispers, through demonstrations, through someone showing up to a party with a box of chargers and a knowing smile. The Grateful Dead parking lots, the communes in Vermont and New Mexico, the crash pads in Haight-Ashbury where people gathered to expand their minds with whatever was available. Someone would produce a dispenser, skip the cream, and suddenly the evening had a new dimension. The gas acquired new names, whippets, emerged as slang somewhere in the early 1970s, borrowed from Whippet, a popular brand of charger. Its accidental marketing genius, a kitchen supply company becoming street drug terminology without anyone planning it or anyone being able to sue over it. Like if Kleenex became slang for cocaine, except nobody at the tissue company was complaining because they were still selling tissues. The charger companies certainly weren't complaining. Sales were up. Why ask questions? Hippie crack appeared around the same time, mostly in the UK, where the counterculture had its own vocabulary for American imports. The name captured something true. The high was short, intense, and immediately repeatable. Not the long journey of an acid trip. A quick hit. A crack-like rhythm of use. Hit, come down, hit again, without the crack-like consequences. Or so everyone assumed. The consequences would turn out to be very real. They just wouldn't show up for decades. The balloon became essential, because direct inhalation from a canister was a terrible idea. The gas comes out cold, very cold, -40 degrees, roughly, cold enough to cause frostbite on lips and throat in seconds, cold enough to freeze lung tissue if you're not careful. People learned this the hard way in emergency rooms across the country. Blue lips, damaged airways, the kind of injuries that make you reconsider your recreational choices. One moment you're chasing euphoria, the next you're explaining to a nurse why your mouth looks like you tried to kiss a glacier. The balloon solved the problem elegantly. Crack the charger into the balloon. The gas warms to room temperature almost instantly. Rubber is a good insulator and body heat does the rest. Now you can inhale without risking frostbite. Safely in the immediate sense. The long-term consequences weren't on anyone's radar yet. That bill wouldn't arrive for decades. The balloon also solved a practical problem: portion control. A single charger fills one balloon. One balloon provides one hit. The rhythm of use became structured. Crack, fill, inhale, repeat. Each dose discrete and countable, which felt responsible compared to, say, drinking from an open bottle or smoking from a shared pipe. You knew exactly how much you were doing. You could tell yourself you'd stop after 5. Whether you actually stopped after 5 was a different matter. The whole ritual had a certain charm to it. The hiss of the charger, a sharp, satisfying release of pressure, the rubbery squeak of the balloon filling, stretching to accommodate the gas. The moment of anticipation before inhaling, balloon pressed to lips, the 30 seconds of bliss. The deflated balloon discarded, already reaching for another charger. It became as familiar as rolling a joint or popping a beer, just another way to alter consciousness, with its own tools and techniques and etiquette. By the mid-1970s, whippets had carved out a comfortable niche in drug culture, not mainstream, not epidemic, just around. A known quantity in certain circles. The people who knew about them knew about them. The people who didn't. Head shops started stocking chargers alongside pipes and rolling papers, maintaining the polite fiction that customers were very enthusiastic about homemade whipped cream and happened to need chargers but never bought dispensers or cream. The gas existed in that grey zone where something is technically a problem, but not enough of a problem for anyone to do anything about it. Occasionally a news story would surface. Teens abuse whipped cream chargers, and parents would briefly worry, and then everyone would move on to the next panic. The chargers stayed on shelves. The balloons kept filling. The high kept happening, 30 seconds at a time. Then came the raves. The electronic music scene that emerged in the late 1980s and exploded through the 1990s had a voracious appetite for substances that matched its aesthetic. MDMA was the obvious pairing, the love drug for the music of love, the empathogene for the empathy generation. Ecstasy and house music went together like peanut butter and jelly. If peanut butter made you want to hug strangers and jelly made you dance until sunrise. But MDMA lasted hours. Sometimes you wanted something shorter. Sometimes you wanted something between songs. Sometimes you wanted a 30-second vacation from reality without committing to a 6-hour journey that might still be going strong when the sun came up and you were supposed to be at brunch with your parents. Nitrous oxide fit the scene like it had been designed for it, which, in a cosmic sense, maybe it had been. The romantic poets who'd inhaled Davy's gas and written about sublime experiences weren't so different from ravers seeking transcendence on a warehouse floor. Same search, different soundtrack, same destination, different route. The high was short enough to fit between DJ sets, quick enough that you could do it and be functional again before the bass dropped. You could have a profound spiritual experience, return to consensus reality, and still catch the best part of the track. No other drug offered that combination of intensity and brevity. LSD was an 8-hour commitment. Mushrooms were a 5-hour journey. MDMA was a 4-hour roll. Nitrous was 30 seconds of yes, and then you were back, ready for another. It paired with a sensory overload of electronic music in ways that felt almost designed. The wah-wah-wah of the high matching the wah-wah-wah of the filters sweeping across the synthesizers. The warmth in your chest matching the warmth of the crowd pressed together on the dance floor. The sense that everything was connected, everything was meaningful. The DJ was a shaman and the bass was a heartbeat, and you were part of something larger, and then it ended, and you were just a person at a party again, and you could do it all over if you wanted. The experience became part of the music. People would time their inhalations to particular moments in tracks, chasing the synchronicity of peak high and peak drop. The rave scene also had a practical advantage that the counterculture had lacked: scale. These weren't small gatherings in someone's apartment. These were events with thousands of people, tens of thousands at the big ones. The famous raves, Castle Morton in the UK, the massive desert parties in California, attracted crowds the size of small towns, and in those crowds markets formed. Balloon sellers appeared at the edges of parties. Not hiding exactly, nitrous wasn't illegal to possess, just to sell for inhalation, and proving intent was nearly impossible, but not advertising either. They'd set up with tanks and a supply of balloons, filling on demand, collecting cash, operating in that strange space where commerce and illegality blur together into something that looks like a food vendor, but definitely isn't. The police didn't quite know what to do with them. The event organisers didn't quite know what to do with them. Everyone just sort of let it happen. The prices were reasonable, a few dollars per balloon, cheaper than drinks, cheaper than MDMA. Cheap enough that you could do it all night without running through your budget. The economics made sense for casual users and heavy users alike. The evidence accumulated. After every event, the canisters, hundreds of them, thousands at the bigger parties. Little silver bullets scattered across fields and parking lots, glinting in the morning light like metallic confetti. Cleanup crews started complaining. Environmental reports started mentioning them specifically. The canisters became visual proof that something was happening at scale, even if nobody was quite sure what to do about it. But here's the thing about the 1990s rave scene. It was still underground. Not underground in the nobody knows about it sense. Plenty of people knew. Millions of people, actually. The rave scene was massive. A genuine youth movement that reshaped music and fashion and drug culture across multiple continents. Underground in the it exists outside mainstream visibility sense. The parties happened in warehouses, in fields, in locations shared by word of mouth and flyer, and eventually text message and primitive websites. The culture had its own magazines, its own radio stations, its own distribution networks for music and drugs and information. If you were in the scene, nitrous oxide was everywhere, as common as water bottles and glow sticks. You'd hear the hiss of tanks and the squeak of balloons as clearly as you'd hear the bass from the speakers. The silver canisters scattered across the ground like metallic autumn leaves. You'd step on them walking to the bathroom. You'd kick them aside dancing. They were part of the landscape. If you weren't in the scene, you might never encounter it. Your average suburban parent in 1995 had no idea that their kid might be spending Saturday nights inhaling gas from balloons at an illegal warehouse party. The average suburban parent in 95 was worried about marijuana and cocaine, and maybe heroin if they watched the evening news. Whipped cream charges weren't on the radar. The local news wasn't running segments about the balloon menace. The think pieces hadn't been written yet. This separation meant the problem, to the extent that there was a problem, stayed contained. The users were mostly young, mostly healthy, mostly using occasionally rather than chronically. A balloon here and there at parties. Not daily use, not the kind of heavy sustained consumption that would turn casual fun into medical catastrophe. Nobody was connecting dots yet. Nobody was tracking patterns. People did balloons at parties, felt weird for 30 seconds, went back to dancing, went home the next day, lived their normal lives until the next party. Nobody ended up in wheelchairs. Nobody made the news. Nobody's parents found out and demanded congressional hearings. The gas had found its audience. Festivals, raves, the margins of mainstream culture. It was a party drug for people who liked parties, a niche product for a niche community, not a crisis, not an epidemic. Just another option in the pharmacological buffet of the electronic music scene, sitting there between the MDMA and the ketamine, waiting for anyone who wanted a 30-second vacation from ordinary consciousness. By 2000, the gas was living 3 separate lives. Dentists' offices, restaurant kitchens, festival fields, and nobody was paying attention to how it moved between them. Sales of whipped cream chargers kept climbing year after year, far beyond what the whipped cream industry could possibly need. Nobody asked questions. The money was good, the product was legal. Why look closer? The system was stable. The system was invisible. The system was about to be disrupted in ways nobody saw coming. Because the rave scene of the 1990s had one limitation that kept everything contained. You had to be there. You had to know about the party. You had to get to the party. You had to be part of the culture that knew what balloons meant and where to find them. There were barriers, friction, the kind of natural limits that kept casual curiosity from becoming mass participation. The internet was starting to change this, of course. Information about drugs was suddenly available to anyone with a connection. But in 2000, the internet was still text and static pages and dial-up speeds. You could read about whippets. You couldn't watch someone do them. You couldn't see the experience. The transmission of drug culture still required physical presence, personal connection, being in the room where it happened. Then came social media. Then came smartphones. Then came algorithms designed to show you exactly what you'd find most engaging. Whether that was cat videos or cooking tutorials or teenagers inhaling from balloons and posting their reactions for millions of viewers to see. The underground was about to go mainstream. The party drug was about to become an epidemic. The canisters that had been scattered across festival fields were about to be scattered across suburban parking lots, college campuses, everywhere. And the damage that had been accumulating invisibly, the B12 depletion, the nerve damage, the paralysis, was about to become impossible to ignore. The gas was about to meet the algorithm, and the algorithm was about to do what algorithms do. Take something niche and local and containable and make it everywhere, instantly, with no warning and no breaks. The 30-second high was about to find a billion-person audience. In 2024, a video went viral in a way that perfectly captures how we discover danger in the 21st century, which is to say, by accident, in public, and far too late. A restaurant in Atlanta posted an Instagram reel. 2 teenage boys were taste-testing food. One of them was holding a bright canister, pink and teal, the colours of a children's birthday party or a gas station energy drink. When the restaurant owner asked his name, the kid inhaled from the canister and answered in a voice that had dropped 3 octaves. "My name is Lil T, man." That's what nitrous oxide does to your voice. Changes the air density in your vocal cords. You sound like a cartoon villain going through puberty. It's funny, the video was shared as comedy. Nobody mentioned the paralysis. Within hours, the comments filled with questions. What was that? Where do I get one? The algorithm noticed the engagement and did what algorithms do. Served the video to more people, who engaged more, which triggered more distribution, which created more engagement. The flywheel spun. By the end of the week, Lil T-Man was everywhere. The canister had a name printed on the side, Galaxy Gas. Within weeks, sales exploded. The company, founded by 3 brothers who ran smoke shops in Georgia, had accidentally created the must-have product of the year. Their marketing budget had been 0. TikTok had done everything for free. The brothers just had to keep the warehouses stocked and the shipping labels printing. The packaging was candy bright, mango smoothie, watermelon lemonade, blue raspberry, grape soda, strawberry cream. The canisters were large, 600 grams, enough for dozens of balloons. They ship through Amazon, Walmart, eBay, and through the brothers' own smoke shop network across 4 states. In theory, they were strictly for making whipped cream. In practice, nobody was making whipped cream. Everyone knew this. The company knew this. The platforms knew this. The customers definitely knew this. But as long as everyone pretended otherwise, the transaction could proceed. A collective fiction maintained for profit. The legal fiction deserves examination. It's doing remarkable work. Galaxy Gas maintains that their products are for culinary use only. The website includes disclaimers in all caps. The typography of legal protection. It is illegal to purposely inhale our product. It is sold only as a food propellant. Buyers must click through terms of service confirming they won't use it recreationally. The company expresses deep concern about misuse. There are links to substance abuse resources, positioned helpfully next to the Add to Cart button. All the legal boxes checked, a hand grenade wrapped in safety warnings and sold with a straight face. The terms of service are comprehensive. They prohibit inhalation. They prohibit resale. They prohibit use by minors. They require agreement that the buyer is a food service professional or home cooking enthusiast. Nobody reads them. Nobody has ever read them. The click-through exists so that lawyers can later say, but they agreed not to inhale it, while gesturing at a document that functions purely as liability shield. When journalists asked why the product sold primarily in smoke shops, not exactly where pastry chefs do their shopping, a spokesperson had an answer ready. Galaxy Gas, they explained, is marketed as an erotic culinary lubricant. An erotic culinary lubricant. Take a moment with that phrase. Let it settle. An erotic culinary lubricant. That's the official explanation for why flavoured nitrous oxide tanks sit on shelves next to bongs and rolling papers and THC vape cartridges. It's for couples who require large quantities of watermelon-flavoured whipped cream for romantic purposes. And they need it in 600-gram canisters because presumably their evenings are long and their appetites substantial. The explanation is absurd. It's supposed to be absurd. The absurdity is the point. Nobody expects you to believe it. They just need something on the record, some official position that lawyer can cite if questions arise. Your Honour, my client clearly stated this was an erotic culinary lubricant. How are they to know customers would inhale it? If you find this unconvincing, you have functional reasoning skills, but legally, it works. As long as the company says it's for food, and as long as they warn against inhalation, they're within the law. What customers do afterward is not their problem. The same logic that lets kitchen knife companies sleep at night. Technically sound, practically absurd, extremely profitable. TikTok eventually noticed that its platform was being used to market paralysis fuel to teenagers. In fairness to TikTok, this is not what they set out to build. They set out to build an engagement machine. The paralysis fuel marketing was an emergent property. They blocked Galaxy Gas as a search term, redirected users to substance, abuse resources instead of 1 million videos of teenagers inhaling until their voices dropped. A responsible intervention, the kind of thing that looks good in press releases and congressional testimony. Users found workarounds within hours, because if there's one thing teenagers are good at, it is defeating content moderation systems designed by adults who think they're clever. Galaxy Gas with an extra Diez bypassed the filter entirely. So did Galaxy Gas, a nitrous tank, and Galaxy Gas, and approximately 47 other misspellings that the filter hadn't anticipated. Users started using emoji codes, rocket ship, gas pump, balloon. They referenced that voice thing and the Lil T stuff without ever typing the blocked words. The platform was playing whack-a-mole with a generation that had grown up gaming its algorithms. The teenagers had home field advantage. They usually do. TikTok updated the filters. Users found new workarounds. TikTok updated again. Users adapted again. The cycle continued. A perpetual arms race between a billion-dollar company and bored 15-year-olds, with the 15-year-olds consistently winning. The videos kept coming, the views kept climbing, the canisters kept shipping. Meanwhile, the algorithm kept doing its job. Identify content that triggers engagement, serve it to similar users, optimize for watch time. Whether the content might land those users in emergency rooms was not part of the optimization function. Nobody had programmed the algorithm to care about that, so it didn't. The packaging choices tell you everything you need to know about the target market. If you're Galaxy Gas, you have a decision to make. You could design clinical packaging, white canisters, medical fonts, serious disclaimers prominently displayed, black text on white background, the visual language of pharmaceutical products and warning labels. This would signal adult product for serious purposes and might discourage recreational use. It would also be boring. Boring doesn't go viral. Boring doesn't get photographed for Instagram stories. Boring sits on shelves while bright colours fly off them. Boring is bad for business. Or you could design something that looks like an energy drink crossed with a music festival poster. Neon colours, gradient effects, fruity flavours with names that sound like they came from a focus group of 15-year-olds. Packaging engineered to catch eyes in social media feeds rather than professional kitchens. Galaxy Gas chose option 2. So did Cosmic Gas. So did Miami Magic and Mass Gas and every other competitor that entered the market. Nobody chose option 1. The market had spoken, and the market wanted pretty colours. The flavours read like a children's menu at a restaurant that's given up on nutrition. Mango smoothie, watermelon lemonade, blue raspberry, grape soda, strawberry cream, cotton candy, birthday cake. Each presumably developed through careful market research into what food service professionals prefer in their whipped cream propellants. Each somehow ending up in the hands of teenagers who had never touched a whipped cream dispenser in their lives. Nobody in the industry would admit they were marketing to children. That would be illegal, or at least legally complicated. They were marketing to adults who happened to prefer bright colours and candy flavours, and packaging that looked like it belonged at a rave. If those adults turned out to be 17, well, that's what the terms of service were for. Researchers started drawing uncomfortable comparisons to Big Tobacco's playbook from the 1990s. The cartoons, the fun flavours, the flashy colours, products that happened to appeal to teenagers while companies insisted, hands on hearts and lawyers at the ready, that they were marketing exclusively to adults. The tobacco executives had testified before Congress with straight faces that they didn't believe nicotine was addictive. The nitrous oxide executives were testifying implicitly that their products were for erotic culinary purposes. Same energy, different century. Joe Camel wasn't smoking camels because he was a sophisticated adult camel with refined tastes and disposable income. Joe Camel was smoking because R.J. Reynolds knew that cartoon characters sell cigarettes to children, and they'd done the math on lifetime customer value. Hook them young, collect revenue for decades. The ethics were questionable. The spreadsheets were immaculate. Think back to Big Tobacco, one researcher told a reporter who asked about the marketing parallels. They deliberately targeted young people with cartoons, fun flavours and flashy colours. That is exactly the parallel we're seeing now with nitrous oxide. Same playbook, different product, different organs being destroyed. The critical difference was the timeline. Tobacco took decades to kill you. You could smoke for 30 years before the cancer showed up, before the emphysema stole your breath, before you became a cautionary tale in a health class. The timeline created plausible deniability, not just for the companies, but for the users. Consequences felt theoretical, something that happened to other people, future people, not you, not now. Nitrous oxide could disable you in weeks. Heavy users were showing up in emergency rooms, unable to walk within a month of starting regular use, some within weeks. The timeline from "this is fun" to "I need a wheelchair" had compressed to a degree that tobacco executives could only dream of if tobacco executives spent time dreaming about harm efficiency metrics. The consequences weren't theoretical anymore. They were immediate, visible, and increasingly difficult to ignore. Galaxy Gas wasn't alone in this market. They were just the one that went viral, the brand name that became the generic, the way people say Kleenex when they mean tissue or Xerox when they mean photocopy. When people talked about flavoured nitrous, oxide tanks, they said Galaxy Gas, even when they meant a competitor's product. A constellation of competitors emerged to capture the demand the viral video had created. Cosmic Gas, Miami Magic, Mass Gas, Baking Bad, a name explicitly referencing a television show about cooking methamphetamine, which somebody approved in a marketing meeting and nobody apparently questioned. Should we name our product after a show about drugs? Yes, that seems fine. Hot Whip, Whip It, Supreme Whip. Each with their own colour schemes, their own flavour options, their own disclaimers that nobody read, their own terms of service that existed purely for legal protection. All of them shipping to your door with the efficiency of modern logistics. No age verification beyond clicking a box that said you were 18. No prescription. No pharmacist asking questions. No friction whatsoever between wanting the product and having it arrive on your doorstep, sometimes within hours if you paid for expedited shipping. The same infrastructure that delivered toilet paper and phone chargers and birthday presents from distant relatives was now delivering paralysis fuel to teenagers. Amazon didn't discriminate. A sale was a sale. The algorithm recommended related products: balloons, dispensers, other brands of whipped cream chargers. Would you like to add these items to your cart? Customers who bought this also bought. The canisters kept getting bigger as the market matured, because that's what markets do. They optimize, they find efficiencies, they scale. Early recreational nitrous oxide came in small chargers, the silver cartridges designed for home whipped cream dispensers, containing maybe 8 grams each. Heavy recreational use meant going through dozens per session. Crack open a charger, fill a balloon, inhale, repeat. The empties piled up like evidence, little silver accusations scattered across parking lots and festival grounds and bedroom floors. The new tanks held 600 grams, or more, 75 times as much gas per unit. One purchase instead of dozens. One canister in a bedroom corner instead of a pile of silver cartridges that screamed, "Something is happening here." The industry had solved the evidence problem, thoughtful of them. Heavy users reported going through multiple tanks per week. Some went through one per day. Quantities of nitrous oxide that would have been logistically inconceivable a generation earlier, when getting the gas required either medical industry connections or the patience to crack open hundreds of tiny whipped cream chargers. The delivery infrastructure had removed all friction. The product was optimized for sustained heavy use. The harm was scaling accordingly. Emergency room doctors started seeing a clinical presentation they hadn't learned about in medical school. Young patients, late teens, early 20s, symmetrical numbness in hands and feet, difficulty walking. Some couldn't feel their legs at all, some couldn't stand. The symptoms looked like textbook B12 deficiency, the kind of nutritional disorder you see in elderly patients with decades of poor diet, or in severe alcoholics whose bodies have forgotten how to absorb vitamins. But these weren't elderly patients, these weren't alcoholics. These were healthy young people who'd been fine a few weeks ago. Kids who played sports, kids who went to college, kids whose parents had no idea anything was wrong until their child couldn't walk across a room. Where did you get vitamin B12 deficiency? Doctors would ask, running through the differential diagnosis. Vegan diet? No. Stomach surgery? No. Chronic alcohol abuse? No. The usual suspects weren't lining up. "I don't know what that is," patients would say, confused by the question. "I just did some whippets." The disconnect was profound. They knew they'd been inhaling nitrous oxide. They'd been doing it for weeks, maybe months. They didn't know nitrous oxide had anything to do with their symptoms. They thought they'd caught a disease, developed a condition, been struck by bad luck. The idea that the fun thing they'd been doing in their bedroom was systematically destroying their nervous system, that hadn't occurred to them. Why would it? Nobody had told them. The packaging certainly hadn't mentioned it. "I just did some whippets" became a phrase emergency room staff learned to listen for. It was the key that unlocked the diagnosis. "Oh, you did whippets. That explains everything. Let me tell you what's happening to your spine." Ugh. The B12 destruction we talked about earlier, the gas breaking down the vitamin your nerves need to function, was happening at industrial scale now. Not a handful of heavy users at music festivals spread across the country, presenting sporadically at emergency rooms that had never seen this before. Thousands of cases, tens of thousands. Teenagers going through multiple tanks per week in their bedrooms, alone, watching videos on phones, while their nervous systems quietly deteriorated. The math that had always governed nitrous oxide harm was being stress-tested by a generation with unlimited supply and no information about the risks. Occasional use is fine. Your body replaces B12 faster than the gas destroys it. Heavy use is not fine. You deplete your reserves, your nerves start dying, paralysis follows. The math hadn't changed, but the usage patterns had changed dramatically and the math was failing at scale. The terrifying part was the speed. Heavy users presented with paralysis after just weeks of consistent use. Not years, not decades, weeks. The timeline from "this is fun" to "I need a wheelchair" could be measured in days. The first symptom was usually tingling in the fingers and toes, pins and needles, the kind of sensation you might dismiss as your foot falling asleep. Then numbness, then difficulty with fine motor control, then difficulty walking, then inability to walk. By the time you noticed the tingling, the damage was already accumulating. By the time walking felt strange, the damage might already be severe. By the time you couldn't feel your legs, some of that damage was permanent. The window for intervention was small, and most people didn't even know there was a window. We're seeing young people, some as young as 18, 19, 20, who are presenting with the kind of nerve damage we used to only see in elderly patients with severe nutritional deficiencies or chronic alcoholism, one neurologist told a reporter. These are kids who were healthy a month ago. Now they can't walk. The neurologists were learning to ask different questions. Not just, what are your symptoms, but have you been using nitrous oxide? They were learning to suspect it even when patients didn't volunteer the information, even when patients didn't connect their fun weekend activity to their Monday morning paralysis. They were seeing enough cases to recognise the pattern. They were also seeing enough cases to be alarmed. The UK got there first, not because British regulators are smarter or more responsive. The initial 2023 ban was actually motivated by complaints about littering and antisocial behaviour, not paralysis. The empty canisters were everywhere. Parks, sidewalks, car parks, little silver cylinders and big colourful tanks discarded wherever the high had worn off. People were annoyed, people complained, politicians responded. The paralysis epidemic was a secondary concern mentioned in the legislative debate, but not the primary driver. Britain banned nitrous oxide because it was messy, not because it was crippling teenagers. But the effect was the same. Once nitrous oxide was classified as a controlled substance, the supply infrastructure collapsed overnight. The tanks disappeared from smoke shops because smoke shops didn't want to become drug dealers facing actual criminal penalties. The online retailers stopped shipping because the legal risk suddenly outweighed the profit margin. Getting nitrous oxide went from order it on Amazon to find an actual criminal willing to sell you controlled substances, and that's a much higher barrier to entry. The results were immediate and measurable. Emergency room presentations for nitrous oxide-related nerve damage dropped. The neurologists who'd been seeing cases weekly started seeing them monthly, then less. The epidemic, and it was an epidemic by any reasonable definition, began receding. Not because people had been educated about the risks, not because they'd made informed choices to stop, because the product was no longer easily available. Supply restriction worked. The Netherlands banned it the same year, 2023, similar results. Thailand had banned it in 2021. Germany began debating restrictions. France tightened regulations. Country after country was recognizing that perhaps a product capable of paralyzing teenagers shouldn't be available for next-day delivery with no age verification. America continued shipping canisters with 2-day prime delivery. The FDA issued warnings. The products kept shipping. The FDA issued more warnings. The products kept shipping. The warnings were strongly worded. The products were brightly coloured. Neither seemed to affect the other. Here's what makes this frustrating. We've known about the dangers of chronic nitrous oxide use for decades. The first case reports of B12 deficiency nerve damage from laughing gas appeared in medical literature in the 1970s. A Lancet paper from 1978 documented the mechanism in detail. The science has been settled for half a century. This isn't emerging research. This isn't cutting-edge discovery. This is information that's been sitting in medical journals since before the internet existed, failing to reach the people who needed it. Dentists know the risks. They limit their own exposure, ensure proper ventilation, follow protocols developed over decades of professional use. They know to treat the gas with respect. Anesthesiologists know. They use nitrous oxide mixed with oxygen in carefully calibrated ratios, administered through equipment designed to prevent harm. They monitor patients. They follow guidelines. They understand what they're working with. Anyone who works with nitrous oxide professionally knows it's not harmless. They take precautions. They limit exposure. They treat it as what it is, a powerful substance that requires careful handling. Recreational users have been told, implicitly and explicitly through every available channel, that it's safe. They've seen it sold openly at festivals by vendors treating the transaction as routine as selling glow sticks. They've watched influencers inhale it for comedy on social media, video after video normalizing the behavior without mentioning risks. They've bought it from websites that list it between stand mixer attachments and measuring cups, positioned as kitchen equipment rather than neurotoxin. The message has been consistent. It's legal, so it must be safe. It's everywhere, so everyone must be doing it. It's just laughing gas, the same stuff they give you at the dentist. What's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is you end up in a wheelchair at 22 trying to explain to your parents that the thing you thought was harmless took away your ability to walk. The worst that could happen is you learn words like subacute combined degeneration, because they now describe your spinal cord. The worst that could happen is you discover that legal and safe are completely different words with completely different meanings, and you learn this distinction in an emergency room. The information gap is lethal. People who would never touch cocaine or heroin, people who think of themselves as responsible, who pride themselves on not using hard drugs, are inhaling a substance that can paralyze them. Because nobody told them otherwise. Because the packaging is bright. Because their friends did it and seemed fine. Because it's legal. Legal doesn't mean safe. The market doesn't communicate that distinction. Why would it? There's no profit in warnings. Somewhere right now, a teenager is discovering Galaxy Gas or one of its competitors. Maybe through TikTok, where the algorithm has served them a video despite the content moderation team's best efforts. Maybe through friends who tried it at a party and want to share the experience. Maybe through the smoke shop down the street that's happy to sell to anyone who looks vaguely adultish. Maybe through Amazon, which will ship it to any address attached to a credit card without asking questions. They don't know about B12 destruction. They don't know about subacute combined degeneration of the spinal cord. They don't know about the UK neurologists who were seeing paralysis cases weekly before their country banned the substance. They don't know that legal and safe are different concepts. They know the canister is bright. They know the flavour sounds appealing. They know it's legal to buy. They know their friends tried it and laughed. They know the guy in the viral video sounded hilarious when his voice dropped. They know it's called laughing gas, which sounds fun, which sounds harmless, which sounds like exactly the kind of thing you do at a party without thinking twice. That's the information they have. Everything else, the mechanism, the risk, the timeline from fun to disability, exist in medical journals they'll never read, and FDA warnings they'll never see. The algorithm doesn't serve warnings. The algorithm serves engagement. The packaging doesn't communicate risk. The packaging communicates fun. The delivery will arrive tomorrow, or maybe today if they paid for expedited shipping. The balloon will fill with gas that's probably fine, almost certainly fine. Statistically, most users don't end up paralyzed. Most users are fine. The odds are in their favour, right, up until they're not. They won't know which category they're in until it's too late to matter. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked. 250 years after Joseph Priestley first synthesized the gas, 2 centuries after Humphry Davy threw history's first Nang party and noted, almost as an afterthought, that it might be useful for surgery, 180 years after Horace Wells died in a prison cell, weeks away from recognition he'd never receive, we've made no progress on the fundamental question: what do you do with a substance that heals and destroys with equal facility? Nitrous oxide is still used medically, exactly as intended. Dentist offices, delivery rooms, surgical suites. It remains on the WHO's list of essential medicines, recognized as valuable and necessary for reducing human suffering. Used properly, with supervision and protocols and trained professionals, it's exactly what Davy predicted 2 centuries ago: a gift to medicine, a tool for eliminating pain. But it's also used in bedrooms by teenagers who learned about it from TikTok, more than ever before, in quantities that would have been unthinkable a decade ago, by people who have no idea what they're risking because nobody told them, and by the time they find out, they're learning it from a neurologist in an emergency room while their legs refuse to move. The paralysis cases continue. The deaths continue. The FDA continues issuing warnings. The products continue shipping. The canisters continue arriving in bright packaging with friendly flavours. The cycle continues. And somewhere in a hospital, another neurologist is writing up another case report about another young person who didn't know, another patient learning medical terminology they never expected to need, another wheelchair ordered, another life rerouted by a brightly coloured canister that promised nothing but whipped cream. The gas is still laughing. The joke stopped being funny a while ago. If you're wondering whether any of this could have been handled differently, the answer is yes. Other countries looked at the same data, the same neurological case reports, the same teenagers in wheelchairs, and actually did something about it. The United Kingdom banned recreational nitrous oxide on November 8, 2023. Possession for personal use now carries up to 2 years in prison and an unlimited fine. Supply or production gets you up to 14 years, double the previous maximum, which suggests someone in Parliament was having a particularly dramatic week. The ban came after their own version of the same crisis. British teenagers called it nangs, possibly derived from the sound distortion users perceive while high, or possibly just because naming drugs is an inherently absurd exercise. By 2019, nearly 9% of young adults aged 16-24 had used it. Third most popular drug after cannabis and cocaine, which is quite the podium to share. The discarded canisters had become a genre of urban litter. Silver cylinders carpeting parks, festivals, and car parks like metallic confetti from the world's saddest party. The deaths mounted, 40 between 2011 and 2020, up from 16 in the previous decade. The neurologists noticed. The politicians eventually noticed. And in a rare moment of governance actually governing, they banned the thing. Here's the interesting part. Before the ban, their own expert advisory council, the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs, a committee whose entire job is to advise on the misuse of drugs, recommended against it. They said the existing laws were sufficient. They said a ban would be difficult to enforce. They said the evidence didn't support such a drastic step. The government ignored them completely, cited a precautionary approach, mentioned antisocial behaviour, proceeded anyway. Whether this was wisdom or overreach depends on who you ask. But the usage rates dropped, from 8.7% in 2019 to 3.9% by 2022. Half. Not because teenagers suddenly developed impulse control, because it became illegal and slightly harder to obtain, which turns out to matter more than we like to admit. The Netherlands got there first, which is unexpected if you know anything about Dutch drug policy. This is the country with licensed cannabis cafes, pragmatic harm reduction programs, and a general, your body, your choice approach to recreational substances that makes American Puritans twitch. If anywhere was going to shrug at laughing gas, you'd think it would be the Dutch. They didn't shrug, they panicked. The ban went into effect on January 1st, 2023, after years of delays, originally planned for 2019, then 2022, then July 2022, then finally New Year's Day 2023, when presumably someone in The Hague decided this particular can had been kicked down enough roads. The numbers explain the panic. In the Netherlands they called it boffening, which sounds like something from a children's book, but was actually destroying young people's spinal cords. 37% of Dutch clubbers used regularly. 1 in 50 adults, 1 in 13 university students. Use among 12 to 16-year-olds was climbing. The age range where experimentation meets developing brains meets very bad outcomes. The traffic accidents were what really got attention. 1,800 crashes involving nitrous oxide between 2018 and 2021. 63 fatal. And here's the policy nightmare. There's no test for nitrous oxide intoxication while driving, no breathalyzer equivalent, no blood test that says this person was huffing, laughing gas when they ran that red light. Police could only guess. Courts could only estimate. The crashes kept happening. The health crisis was worse. When 2,000-gram megatanks appeared in 2017, tanks that could fill 150 balloons, that sold for 40 to 50 euros, that turned occasional party use into at-home addiction, the neurologists started seeing something they'd never encountered at scale. Young people with spinal cord injuries, average age 22. 64 patients in just 2 years, treated for partial paralysis caused by a gas sold for whipped cream. Companies with names like Partygas and Lachgas Express were operating openly, selling nitrous oxide as what it obviously was, a party drug, while maintaining the legal fiction that it was for culinary purposes. The disconnect between product name and product claim had gotten so absurd that even the famously tolerant Dutch authorities couldn't pretend anymore, so they banned it, added nitrous oxide to the Opium Act, which sounds dramatic until you remember the Opium Act is just what Dutch drug law is called. Small canisters for actual whipped cream use remained legal but couldn't be resold to third parties. Large tanks were banned entirely. Enforcement began. By July 2023, police had seized 23,000 cylinders. The storage problem became its own comedy. You can't incinerate seized nitrous oxide, because it might explode. Only one company in the country can process it properly. and the overflow had to be exported to Belgium, which presumably had opinions about becoming the Netherlands' nitrous oxide disposal site. Australia watched both examples and decided to try something more complicated, a state-by-state patchwork that ensures maximum confusion for everyone involved. Western Australia went hardest. As of October 2024, those small 8-gram canisters can only be sold to registered food businesses. Large canisters banned entirely. Retailers face $30,000 penalties. Victoria went with the put-it-somewhere annoying approach. Products behind counters, on high shelves, in locked cabinets. South Australia tried age restrictions and time-of-day sales bans. New South Wales was still in the consultation phase, that bureaucratic holding pattern where everyone agrees something should be done while nobody agrees on what. The Australian numbers are smaller but no less concerning. 22 emergency department presentations in 2020, including 8 patients with spinal cord degeneration. In a country of 26 million people, 8 spinal cord injuries from a gas sold for making desserts. Thailand banned recreational nitrous oxide balloons in 2021 after the Thai Food and Drug Administration discovered that oxygen deprivation, the thing that happens when you replace the oxygen in your lungs with anything else, carries health risks. Revolutionary findings. The ban targeted the street vendors who'd been selling nitrous-filled balloons on Khao San Road, Bangkok's famous backpacker strip since around 2013. Low-priced offerings, no questions asked. Tourists and locals alike lining up for a quick hit between bars. The balloons became part of the scenery, until they didn't. By 2024, the product had resurfaced anyway, catering primarily to foreign visitors who presumably didn't read Thai regulatory announcements before their vacation. The enforcement challenge is eternal. A balloon looks like a balloon. A canister looks like a canister. The difference between whipped cream party and paralysis fuel distribution is entirely a matter of intent, and intent is hard to prove when everyone's maintaining the fiction. The United States naturally has done approximately nothing. No federal ban, no FDA enforcement beyond warning letters, no DEA scheduling. The products remain completely legal to purchase, possess, and inhale, at least in most jurisdictions, with the usual American patchwork of local ordinances that vary by county and change every election cycle. Some states have age restrictions. Some cities have tried ordinances. Ohio banned sale to minors in 2022 after the usual tragedy to legislation pipeline, but there's no comprehensive federal approach, no coordinated strategy, no indication that anyone in Washington considers this a priority. Why not? The honest answer involves lobbying, which it usually does. The food industry uses nitrous oxide. The automotive industry uses nitrous oxide. The medical industry uses nitrous oxide. All of those industries have representation in Washington. Teenagers getting paralyzed from recreational inhalation do not have representation in Washington. The math on political attention is predictable. The slightly more honest answer is that America doesn't really do drug policy based on evidence. Never has. The war on drugs wasn't evidence-based. Neither was prohibition. Neither was the opioid response, until it wasn't a response anymore and became a catastrophe managed through press releases. American drug policy is vibes-based. What feels punitive enough? What plays well in campaign ads? What creates the appearance of doing something without requiring actual coordination or expenditure? Nitrous oxide doesn't fit the vibes. It's laughing gas. It's whipped cream propellant. It's the thing the dentist gives you. It sounds silly. Politicians don't want to be the person introducing the Laughing Gas Crisis Act and explaining at town halls why they're trying to regulate dessert toppings. Much easier to focus on fentanyl, which sounds scary and is killing people at a rate that can't be ignored. The fact that nitrous oxide is also killing people and paralysing more can be ignored, because nobody's counting systematically, and the victims don't photograph as dramatically. The UK proved you can reduce usage by half with a ban. The Netherlands proved you can disrupt supply chains even when the product has legitimate uses. Australia proved you can try something, even something messy and state by state rather than nothing. America looked at all this evidence and continued selling flavoured nitrous oxide tanks through Amazon with next-day Prime delivery. If that sounds like a policy failure, congratulations, your pattern recognition is functioning. But here's the thing about patterns, and here's where this story gets bigger than nitrous oxide, bigger than any single drug, bigger than any single country's policy choices. We keep doing this, over and over. Throughout all of recorded history, humans discover a substance. The substance makes us feel good, or different, or nothing at all. We use it for a while. Some people get hurt. We debate whether to do anything about the getting hurt. We usually do nothing, or we do the wrong thing, or we do the right thing too late. The substance continues. The casualties continue. Eventually we normalize them. Opium, alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine. Opioids again, under new brand names and better marketing. Now, nitrous oxide, which we discovered in 1772 and still can't figure out how to handle responsibly 250 years later. The pattern isn't complicated. Find substance, use substance, hurt people, debate, fail, repeat. Why can't we break it? The information gap. Here's what's strange about nitrous oxide. The medical information exists. It's comprehensive. It's peer-reviewed. It's available. If you search PubMed for nitrous oxide neurotoxicity, you will find hundreds of papers, case reports, mechanism studies, treatment protocols. The science is settled. Chronic heavy use causes B12 depletion, which causes spinal cord degeneration, which causes paralysis. This is not controversial. This is not debated in the medical literature. This is known. But the people who need it don't know it. The teenagers buying Galaxy Gas aren't reading PubMed, they're watching TikTok. Medical knowledge exists in one universe. Recreational use exists in another. The universes don't touch. Medical journals are behind paywalls, written in jargon designed for professionals. Social media optimizes for engagement, not accuracy. Product packaging is designed to sell, not warn. FDA warnings get covered for a day, then sink while product videos keep going viral. Truth doesn't have a marketing budget. Products do. The information exists. The information never arrives. There's a cognitive trap here that kills people. Legal does not mean safe. Obvious when stated directly. Cigarettes are legal. Alcohol is legal. Driving 70 miles per hour while checking your phone is legal in most states. But human brains don't process it that way. We're wired to use legality as a proxy for safety. If it's sold in stores, surely someone checked. If it's on Amazon, surely Amazon would pull it if it were dangerous. Wrong. Spectacularly wrong. The FDA doesn't approve products that are unregulated. It only regulates what it's mandated to regulate. Nitrous oxide sold as a food propellant isn't a drug legally, so the FDA doesn't evaluate it as a drug. The legal fiction protects the product from review. The cognitive shortcut fills the gap with false confidence. A teenager sees a bright canister at a smoke shop. It's for sale. It's legal. Every signal says, this is fine. The signal that says this might paralyze you exists in a medical journal they've never heard of, behind a paywall they can't access, in language they couldn't parse anyway. They buy it. They inhale. They become another data point in a literature they'll never read. The timeline compression is the cruelest part. Most harmful substances give you time. Tobacco takes decades. Alcohol takes years. Even heavy opioid use takes months to years before the worst consequences arrive. The delay creates the illusion of control. I can stop whenever I want. This isn't hurting me. I'm fine. Nitrous oxide can destroy your spinal cord in weeks. Heavy users, the ones going through multiple 600-gram canisters per week, have shown up in emergency rooms unable to walk within a month of starting, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes less. The B12 depletion happens fast. The myelin sheath degradation happens fast. The paralysis can be permanent. This isn't smoking for 40 years and then getting cancer. This is using regularly for a month and then needing a wheelchair. And by the time you notice something's wrong, the numbness in your fingers, the tingling in your toes, the weakness in your legs that you attributed to being tired, the damage may already be done, may already be irreversible, may already have rewritten the rest of your life. 30 seconds of euphoria, 30 years in a wheelchair. The math doesn't work. But you don't know the math until after you've done it, because no one told you, because the information exists in a world you never touch. There's one more piece of this story, one more pattern that connects everything. Remember Horace Wells, the dentist from Block 1, who figured out what Humphry Davy missed, who got laughed out of Massachusetts General Hospital when his demonstration went wrong, who died in a prison cell in 1848, believing himself a failure. Here's the detail that matters now. The Parisian Medical Society had already voted to honour him as the discoverer of anaesthesia 12 days before he cut his own artery. The recognition was real. The letter was in transit. The information existed. It just hadn't arrived yet. He died without knowing he'd won. The gap between information exists and information reaches the person who needs it killed him as surely as the razor did. That's the parallel, 1848 to 2024. Wells's information was a letter travelling by ship. Slow, physical. The gap was technological. In 2024, information moves at the speed of light. The case reports are published. The mechanism is understood. And the teenagers buying Galaxy Gas will never see any of it. The gap isn't technological anymore. It's structural. Medical knowledge lives in peer-reviewed journals behind paywalls. Products live on TikTok, in smoke shops, on Amazon with next-day delivery. The universes don't touch. Wells died 12 days before recognition arrived. Users are being paralysed every week while the information that could save them sits in databases they'll never access. What would it take to close the gap? Clear warnings in plain language, age verification that actually works, public awareness on actual platforms where actual users actually are. None of this is impossible. None of it is expensive. None of it is happening. And the products keep shipping. And the paralysis keeps happening. I'd like to tell you this story has a hopeful ending, that the information is spreading, that the tide is turning, that we're about to learn the lesson we've refused to learn for 250 years. I can't tell you that. The evidence doesn't support it. The United Kingdom banned recreational nitrous oxide and usage dropped by half. The United States looked at the same evidence and did nothing. The information exists. The information doesn't move. The gap remains. Somewhere right now, a delivery driver is dropping off a package. Inside is a bright canister with a friendly flavour name. The teenager who ordered it has never heard of subacute combined degeneration of the spinal cord. They've never read a medical journal. They've never seen an FDA warning. They know what their friends said. They know what the algorithm showed them. They know it's legal, so it must be safe. They'll find out otherwise, or they won't. The lottery continues. Most people are fine. Some people aren't. Nobody knows which category they're in until after. The information gap is structural. The cognitive trap is universal. The cycle is eternal. Horace Wells died believing he'd failed 12 days before recognition arrived. The modern version of his tragedy happens every week in emergency rooms across America when someone learns the name of their diagnosis and realizes no one ever told them the risk. The information existed. The information never reached them. It's still not reaching them. Wells's monument in Hartford says, "Discoverer of anesthesia." Below it, "There shall be no pain." Both inscriptions are true, and both are lies. There shall be no pain unless you use it wrong, unless nobody tells you the risk, unless you're 17 and the algorithm showed you a funny video and the canister was bright and it was legal, so it must be safe. He discovered anesthesia. He also discovered the gap, the space between knowledge existing and knowledge arriving. He just didn't live long enough to name it. Somewhere right now, a canister is being opened. A balloon is being filled. Someone is about to discover what nitrous oxide feels like. They'll probably be fine. Statistically, most people are fine, some people aren't. And they never get to know, ahead of time, which category they're in. The lottery runs in the dark. The results arrive as diagnoses. The information exists to tell you which. It just never arrives.